Welcome back to Rapture Tales. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and get ready for another story you won't forget. Let's dive back to the story. Charlotte Hayes used to believe that marriages didn't break suddenly. They eroded quietly, like stone worn smooth by water. Her marriage to Sebastian Hayes had once felt solid, dependable, built on shared routines and mutual respect rather than dramatic passion. They lived in a tasteful home in Leckie, admired by friends who mistook order for happiness. Charlotte managed a household with quiet efficiency, balancing her consulting career with emotional labor that held their marriage together. Sebastian, ambitious and increasingly self-important, had grown accustomed to her steadiness. In the early years, he sought her counsel, celebrated her successes, and treated her as an equal. Over time, those gestures faded, replaced by impatience and distraction. Charlotte noticed it in the way Sebastian no longer waited for her to finish speaking, how he dismissed the concerns as overthinking, how he seemed permanently half-present. Still, she adjusted, believing love required flexibility, believing endurance was proof of maturity rather than a slow surrender of self. The emotional distance did not announce itself loudly. It arrived disguised as fatigue, late meetings, and professional pressure. Sebastian began returning home well past midnight, loosening his tie with irritation, brushing off Charlotte's concern with vague explanations about clients and networking. Eventually, he suggested moving into the guest room, claiming his sleep schedule was disrupted and he needed space to focus. Charlotte agreed, swallowing the unease tightening in her chest. Nights grew colder, not in temperature, but in meaning. She lay awake listening to footsteps she no longer recognized as familiar, wondering when companionship had turned into shared silence. She told herself it was temporary. She told herself not to imagine betrayal, where exhaustion could explain everything. But deep down, something in her understood that this was not a pause, it was a withdrawal. The first real fracture came from a place Charlotte never expected, a casual conversation at a corporate luncheon. A colleague mentioned Sebastian in passing, laughing lightly as she referenced his very close working relationship with a young woman named Mia Collins. The words were not accusatory, just careless, but they struck Charlotte with quiet precision. She smiled politely, excused herself, and spent the rest of the day operating on instinct rather than emotion. That evening, alone in the house Sebastian no longer occupied emotionally, she did something she had never done before. She searched. Social media revealed what Sebastian's words never had. Mia's profile was public, curated carefully but not discreetly enough. Photos showed dinners Charlotte recognized, locations Sebastian had claimed were business only, reflections in mirrored walls, cropped hands resting too familiarly, captions filled with inside jokes Charlotte was no longer part of. Each image felt like a confirmation rather than a discovery. Charlotte did not confront him. Shock did not paralyze her. It clarified her. She began paying attention in a way she never had before, noting timelines, cross-referencing excuses with evidence, watching Sebastian grow increasingly careless. He smiled at his phone in ways he never smiled at her anymore. He guarded conversations, stepped outside to take calls, returned home wearing someone else's scent. The betrayal hurt, but what cut deeper was an assumption that she was oblivious. Charlotte realized that Sebastian did not see her silence as dignity. He saw it as weakness. That misjudgment became her advantage. She decided then that if the marriage was ending, it would end on her terms, not his convenience. Sebastian's behavior shifted once he assumed discovery no longer mattered. He spoke openly about needing freedom, framing himself as a man suffocated by routine rather than someone who had broken vows. He grew irritable when Charlotte asked simple questions, portrayed her concern as emotional instability. Meanwhile, Mia became bolder, appearing at events where Charlotte knew Sebastian would be, making no effort to hide her presence. Charlotte noticed everything, filing each detail away carefully. She stopped reacting emotionally, choosing instead to observe patterns. Betrayal became data. Lies became leverage. She no longer cried when she was alone. Instead, she planned. There was a strange calm in preparation, a sense of control she had not felt in months. Charlotte scheduled a consultation with a solicitor under the guise of estate planning. She reviewed property documents she had signed years earlier without scrutiny, trusting Sebastian implicitly. What she found unsettled her. Assets registered solely in his name, joint accounts she had never actively managed, assumptions she had made about equality that were never legally guaranteed. The betrayal expanded beyond infidelity into something structural. She realized Sebastian had not only replaced her emotionally, but had positioned himself to discard her financially. That realization hardened her resolve. She began documenting everything meticulously: emails, messages, bank statements, travel records. She installed discreet surveillance in shared spaces under legal advice, ensuring every piece of evidence was obtained lawfully. This was no longer about revenge. It was about reclaiming authorship of her own life. When Sebastian finally served the divorce papers, he did so with rehearsed sympathy. He spoke gently, as though delivering bad news to a subordinate rather than ending a marriage he had already abandoned. He assured Charlotte the separation would be smooth, that she would be looked after, that there was no need for conflict. Charlotte listened without interruption, her expression unreadable. She did not beg, did not argue, did not reveal the storm of preparation behind her calm exterior. She thanked him for his honesty and asked for time to review the documents. Sebastian left that conversation confident. He had won, emotionally, legally, and morally. He told Mia that night that Charlotte was broken, resigned, finished. 6 hours later, Sebastian and Mia checked into a luxury resort, champagne already waiting. They toasted to freedom, to their future, to how easy everything had been. Mia spoke eagerly about moving into the house properly, about renovations, about the life she believed Sebastian was offering her. Sebastian basked in her admiration, unaware that his assumptions were collapsing quietly back home. Charlotte worked through the night. She executed the final steps with precision, activating legal clauses Sebastian had forgotten existed, transferring ownership where permitted, freezing accounts pending litigation, and securing what was rightfully hers. By morning, the marriage was not the only thing dissolved. Sebastian's illusion of control was too. Sebastian and Mia returned expecting applause from the universe. Instead, they found their luggage arranged neatly on the porch, the locks changed, the house unrecognizable in its silence. Confusion turned to panic as Sebastian realized he no longer had access to the home, the accounts, the narrative he had crafted. Inside, letters waited. A flash drive waited. Evidence waited. Charlotte did not shout or threaten. She let truth speak in documentation, timelines, and undeniable proof. Mia's excitement evaporated as reality set in. The man she believed was powerful was suddenly exposed as reckless and vulnerable. Charlotte did not stay to witness the fallout. She had already stepped into a life that belonged entirely to her. Quiet, deliberate, and free. Sebastian underestimated how quickly admiration could curdle into suspicion. In the days following the lockout, his phone rang endlessly, not with concern but with demands. Business partners wanted explanations for frozen accounts. Friends who had once admired his confidence now questioned his judgment. The flash drive Charlotte left behind did not merely document an affair. It exposed deception layered upon arrogance. Emails revealed how Sebastian had planned to quietly remove Charlotte from his life while preserving his image. Messages to Mia painted a man who promised wealth he did not fully control and power he had not legally secured. Sebastian attempted damage control, calling lawyers, issuing apologies, insisting everything was a misunderstanding. But evidence does not negotiate. The truth, once released, does not retreat. Mia watched this unraveling with growing discomfort. She had entered the relationship believing she was upgrading her life, stepping into a polished future defined by luxury and status. Instead, she found herself entangled in legal complications, whispered conversations, and sudden financial limitations. The house she imagined decorating was no longer accessible. The lifestyle she expected began shrinking rapidly. She asked questions Sebastian could not answer convincingly. When admiration faded, calculation replaced it. Mia realized that loving Sebastian without his power offered no advantage. The man who once seemed decisive now appeared desperate, reactive, and exposed. The shift was subtle but final. Sebastian's legal battles intensified as Charlotte's preparation became evident. Her solicitor moved decisively, filing motions that framed Sebastian not as a victim of marital breakdown, but as a participant in deliberate financial misconduct. Charlotte did not appear emotional in court filings. She appeared meticulous. Each document reinforced a narrative Sebastian could not escape. He had acted in bad faith. Joint assets had been manipulated. Commitments had been violated long before divorce proceedings began. Judges do not respond to charm. They respond to clarity. Sebastian's legal team struggled to counter evidence that had been gathered patiently over months. His confidence eroded as every attempt to regain control was met with another sealed document, another procedural setback. Meanwhile, Charlotte remained largely invisible. She did not attend social gatherings. She did not engage in public disputes. She moved quietly into a new flat, modest by comparison to her former home, but intentionally chosen. The simplicity felt restorative. For the first time in years, she arranged her life without accommodating someone else's needs. She slept uninterrupted. She ate when she was hungry. She worked with renewed focus, rediscovering professional confidence that had dimmed under emotional neglect. Healing, she learned, was not dramatic. It was cumulative. Every peaceful morning was a victory Sebastian would never witness. Mia's departure was not marked by argument or tears. It came one afternoon when Sebastian returned to find her belongings gone. No note, no explanation, just absence. She had calculated the cost and decided it was too high. To her, Sebastian had become an investment with diminishing returns. Without wealth, without certainty, without admiration, he no longer justified the risk. Sebastian sat alone in the same silence Charlotte had endured for months, only now without preparation or dignity. For the first time, he felt the weight of consequence rather than anticipation. The world no longer bent around him. Public perception followed swiftly. Whispers turned into conversations. Conversations became judgments. Invitations slowed, then stopped. Colleagues distanced themselves cautiously, unwilling to be associated with scandal. Sebastian realized reputation was far more fragile than he had believed. He had spent years building a professional image, only to dismantle it through personal recklessness. Regret arrived too late to be useful. Apologies, when offered without power to back them, sounded hollow even to his own ears. Charlotte watched none of this directly. She learned of it secondhand, through updates from her solicitor and occasional messages from concerned acquaintances. Each piece of news felt strangely distant. She did not feel triumph, only relief. She had not set out to destroy Sebastian. She had simply refused to be destroyed. That distinction mattered deeply to her. She focused instead on rebuilding her life intentionally. She enrolled in leadership programs she had once postponed. She traveled alone for the first time, discovering strength in solitude. She reclaimed parts of herself she had softened to maintain peace in a failing marriage. The anger she expected never fully arrived. In its place came clarity. Charlotte understood now that betrayal was not a reflection of her worth, but of Sebastian's limitations. She had loved genuinely. He had consumed care without reciprocation. That imbalance, once recognized, no longer hurt, it educated. She no longer rehearsed conversations she would never have. Closure, she realized, did not require confrontation. It required acceptance. Sebastian attempted one final reach. A carefully worded message arrived months later, filled with remorse and nostalgia. He spoke of mistakes, of underestimating her, of wanting to make things right. Charlotte read it once, calmly, without emotional reaction. She did not respond immediately. She let the words sit, then forwarded them to her solicitor as documentation. That was her answer. Silence, now, was not submission. It was boundary. As the divorce concluded, the final rulings reflected Charlotte's preparation. She retained what she had fought for. Sebastian walked away diminished, not only financially but internally. The man who once believed control was inherent learned too late that power without respect collapses quickly. Charlotte's new life did not announce itself with celebration. It unfolded quietly, steadily, with purpose. She began mentoring younger women navigating careers and relationships, sharing wisdom without bitterness. She invested thoughtfully, rebuilt confidently, and loved cautiously but honestly. She learned that peace was not the absence of pain, but the absence of fear. Her past no longer defined her. It informed her. 6 hours after her divorce, Sebastian had celebrated believing he had won freedom. Months later, Charlotte understood the truth. Freedom belonged to the one who prepared, endured, and chose herself. That's all for today. Like, subscribe, and see you in the next episode. Stay tuned.